Okay. So the idea is that we're going to train the LLM with these guidelines to be able to detect the literacy level of users based on the kinds of words they use and the length of their query, and then auto adjust the level of literacy of the responses and give the user the ability to click a button for more detail or less detail, but use the language of the query to try to as an initial guess of the literacy level. So we've used AI to generate a few guidelines for how to detect that. So this is the list of words that the AI system generated that could be used to detect whether someone's at either low, moderate, or high literacy. We'll have to define in more detail what low, moderate, and high literacy means in terms of standardized scales. But this, you'll see that low literacy has simpler words and shorter sentences. Moderate has slightly longer sentences and more complex words, and high literacy has advanced words and will have longer queries.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So we see that all of the FDA labels and even some of the guidance says grades 8 to 10 for readability, and our low literacy grade on this document, you said it's like grade 4 to 5, it's like simpler terms.
I
How
don't I don't know if it's grade 4 or 5, so
okay.
we haven't measured it yet, but we'll have to define what we mean by low literacy and
Yeah, because
adjust the examples.
I was just thinking like how would we make sure that yes, it's tailored to low literacy, but it's not losing like the important content of the medication label that
So during the when we do testing on this, we'll have to see what it actually responds and to see whether it's omitting information. So we'll have to do that empirically through testing. It's a good question. I don't know. It might, and it's there'll always be a button that say give me more details or explain it in more details or
yeah,
um,
because it would be helpful if for the low literacy part, like if it doesn't like see how it says like non-medical terms, but having some if like one of the terms like actually important, like if they mention it to their doctor, we could have the word and then the LLM describes what it is or something like that. Like, you might experience this. This means
yes, we'll
then
have to have additional content to
yeah.
explain things, which for how to explain things and definitions of certain key terms at different levels of literacy, which brings us to the next training document, which is this is a guideline to fine tune and train the LLM to figure out how to tailor those responses once it has a guess of what level. And the way we're going to do it is by generating sample questions and example answers at different levels of literacy. And this document shows for each question 3 types of responses and why each one has been, how it's been modified either for low, moderate, or high literacy. And it gives explanations. So by giving, hundreds of examples to the LM and fine tuning it, it will start to learn on its own how to do this for future questions. We'll have to have humans verify this training material, but we can use AI to generate most of this material and have humans verify it, both for accuracy and language level. So this was generated in a few minutes just with one of the LLMs. The other aspect is how to summarize, how to tailor based on the user persona. So we asked the AI system to generate a way of taking the big personas that we have and condense it in a more condensed format such that it can be used for personalizing answer. And this is what the AI system came up with. It's a sort of set of categories and different descriptors of the person in a more concise format. And we'll give this also as training material to the LLMs so that when we feed it, 50 or 100 pages of the summary of the patient, it will distill it down into a more condensed format. And this can be something that can be cached. So every time the patient goes in to use the chatbot, instead of reading the 100-page summary, it goes to this shorter summary. And so this is the example for Maria. We took that big long persona and it distilled it down into these. It looks like it's about 2-page summary. And then it'll have to have guidance how to use the summary to personalize the answer, which brings us to the next guideline, which this one describes how to use that summary to tailor the answers and personalize it. And it has a couple of different dimensions for doing that. One is the literacy, which we have a separate guideline on. The other one is trying to incorporate cultural and personal factors. Here are some examples of this, but I think we'll have to create additional examples of what we think are valid and fair personalizations and which ones might be inappropriate or maybe beyond what an LLM should be tailoring. So this still needs more work. Well, all this needs work, but this one we haven't generated the examples yet. And we can use AI to generate the examples, but we'll need humans to verify those examples. We have a separate document on empathy, which I'll show you in a second. And there's some guardrails that we'll have to continue to advance, to expand. We have about a couple of pages in another document. So it's a high-level document on personalization, and then there are more specific documents that describe. And so then this is sort of a structure for how to structure the responses. And then some examples. So let me show you now the empathy. So this document shows examples of questions and answers with an example of how to make them more empathetic. So the first response is a non-empathetic answer. It's pretty factual. And the next example shows empathy using low literacy wording. And then it has some other examples, both also at high literacy, that has empathy, plus the high literacy explanations of the rest of the content. And then for each answer, it says why it thinks it's an empathetic answer. So we'll have to verify, review all these training examples. I think we can use AI to generate the training content, then have humans verify it, and then go back and train it. So the last one are just more examples of empathy training content. So this is for Maria, and it gives specific examples of Maria, and then it shows which guideline it used to personalize both for health literacy and empathy. So this is just using one LLM that we use Grok. to generate that. We can use the other LLMs to generate more training material, review all of it, combine one set, and then feed it to our fine tune it so it doesn't have to ingest that for every user. And then we can do a test of one version of the LLM with our training material to see, and another without it. We will need to review our evaluation scales, and I think we're going to need a better empathy scale. So I think that's a high priority. And then I think we need to, as a group, discuss whether these personalizations people agree on or not. So we'll need, this is kind of the human in the loop. This is us humans deciding whether we agree with what AI is suggesting to do.
So when we're using the chatbot, is it that every session the chatbot is tailoring the literacy level and
Yes.
it doesn't have the ability to like store that information from
So
catalogs from before?
So two things. One, the training material we'll use to train the LLM once, and it'll have that for all future sessions. And that's sort of what we discussed yesterday with the technical meeting in 2.1 is how to do that training, have that. So there's fine tuning such that the LLM, the weightings have learned that. And then there are things that will be used at runtime, such as the actual medication label. So that all of this training material will be used to fine tune it ahead of time. So you don't have to load all of this in real time, and it already knows. It's already been customized. So that's why I think we need to have control over the LLM and not just use an out of the box LLM, because we want to have a custom trained LLM. The other challenge will be is we want the LLM to remember past conversations such that the more it gets to know the patient, it can tailor that. And so we'll need kind of a user profile for each patient, and we need to keep those chats confidential between the LLM and the patient. So we need an architecture solution for connecting all those discussions, and so there'll be a place in the database that has to have that. So I think that's a technical challenge that we will need. And there's a limit to what the context window, how much memory it has. Now those are getting bigger every month. So eventually we won't have to worry about that problem, but for the next year or so, I think there's a limit to how much it can remember. So
Because it would be good if like the patient, if they have to go for a doctor's appointment and talk about some symptoms they've been experiencing for a while, they can ask the chatbot like, oh, when was the last time I asked about stomach ache and was talking about it, and then they can relay that information, right?
Yeah. It'd be great if the chatbot could even sort of generate charts and summaries. And, that's why I think we want to take the chatbot, that history, and summarize it in a structured format that can go into a longitudinal database that the patient can access and then share with their provider, and just the factual part of sort of not, the gory details of all the description, but, you asked about this medication on this date, or you asked about this symptoms, right? And
It'll be also good for the provider to see like what symptoms appear during what week that they're taking the medication, right? So like having a timeline of
right. So that'll be really helpful for real world evidence.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's that's a huge opportunity. It's right. So when did and how often were they asking about pain and the severity of pain and then you could even try as we add the voice track analyze the voice pattern. You could detect over time people's speech pattern becoming more stressed or slowed or slurred. You know,
Yeah.
imagine if this could actually detect before you actually have a stroke, detecting that you're speaking in a slurred way, or if it had a visual of your face, detect that your face doesn't, you may be at risk of a stroke.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think this is something I'm really interested in, is like the potential of this chatbot to be a tool for collecting longitudinal symptoms at home for real world evidence, right? A lot of times we don't know why people stop taking medications, right? But the chatbot could sort of give a summary of at what point people started having doubts of the risk benefit, or maybe the side effects were too much for them, or was it because they just didn't understand when to take their medication? Right? That data is really hard to collect, but I think we have a technically feasible way of training this now with. But let's think about it. We'll review it. The additional people
Do
that
you
are here.
forward the materials?
Yeah, I'm going to put it in the working group area, and I'll send a link, and then we can send the recording as well, like the summary of the recording, and then we'll present it in more detail in 2 weeks. And in the meantime, maybe I can work with all of you to use the other LLMs to generate similar content,
Mm.
and then we can synthesize it, and we'll need to start creating that space, Catherine, where we can upload all this training material and
Mhm.
do the fine tuning. The fine tuning, Catherine, have you and Lewis done some of that? Do you know what I know that you said that that was significantly higher contact to do the fine tune as opposed to just rag and retrieve it at runtime. Have you run some experiments on or have a feel for how much cost it will be to fine tune?
Yeah, I did one on Gemini, where I basically deployed a custom model and then uploaded my documents to Google Cloud, and then ran the training on that model. And I didn't do too much because I did one, and this was just on my personal account. I did one, and the training hit me for like $30 or something. So I
Like,
didn't want to
how
be,
much content did you upload for training? How many
it
pages?
wasn't that much. It was just testing. It was just a single JSONL file back when I was testing out it was either the persona or the guardrails back in January, for the first chatbot.dci network thing that we did. Um, yeah, it was
But
back in
the
January.
file, was it like a code that you uploaded or a document, and how many pages?
It was just a JSONL file, so which is basically just JN, so it was like maybe a couple hundred lines. Um, because there's a cost when you run the actual, not to upload, but when you run the actual training on the model itself. Um,
So it was not much content, sounds like.
yeah, I mean, the only reason I didn't do too much more just because it was my personal account. So
Yeah.
But yeah.
So when you put in the training, like, is it, I guess is it the computing cost, is it based on the amount of content, but is it also based on how long you run the training for?
Yeah, I believe it's how much and then just how like when you run it, uh how long that it takes. And then that kind of applies to the model that you deployed.
But how
Um,
long does it take? Is it just based on the length of the content, or do you set it? Are there parameters for you to tell it for how long you want it to train on that?
you mean like how long when you're processing it or how
Yes.
long you want them to remember it?
No,
For me, I
when you're
believe,
processing it.
yeah, I believe for me it was just like I didn't tell them anything. It was just until it was done, and I
Yes, yeah.
believe it was like I can't remember exactly, but I don't think it was longer than an hour. So, but I didn't like. I just basically said run. I didn't like put in any parameters about how long to
Mm.
run for or anything. So.
All right, so I guess we'll have to tread carefully here.
And then the other cost is just obviously to actually use it, you have to basically deploy that model on the enterprise. I say enterprise, it's just really like a custom one, not their free API. Um,
Yeah.
it's your space in Google Cloud.
And which one did you use?
This was all in Gemini and Google Cloud and Vertex, which is the Google Cloud AI section. And it's just linked to your
So
Google account.
it's like the Gemini version?
Well, it's Gemini, but it's a custom
Yeah,
fine
okay.
tune. So
Yeah, but
instead of
it's Gemini,
using,
not Gemma.
yeah. So
All right.
instead of using the free Gemini API, the public one, it's just your personal
Some of the
training model.
smaller LLMs like Gemma, might take less training power, but they're not trained with as much.
Well, it would take less training power, but you would need more of a server because you'd be
Right.
controlling the server rather than having it on
Yeah,
Google Cloud. So,
yeah.
and
I've
then
been
the other one is you could do Amazon Bedrock, which is obviously back to Amazon,
yeah,
where it's basically like Google Cloud. It hosts a version of, I
yeah.
think they have Gemma, and I don't know if they have Gemma, but I know they have like Mistral and things like that, um, which would be like Google Cloud, but probably more expensive, and it would probably go down, like we just saw yesterday.
Yeah. I think there's pros and cons. I mean, I think running it locally, you have to put the upfront costs of the hardware, but then,
It's
all
not
that,
just the cost of the hardware, but it's also security too.
yeah,
Uh,
you'd be able to
so,
then link it to your
yeah.
medical record and secure it um, in a more reliable way. Um, and then once we do all this fine tuning and training, it's not as if the LM is going to go away because it's always going to be on our server. But if you train, I guess it's unlikely that if you buy a cloud service and you're running a private instance, that they would take away your private instance.
Yeah.
Uh,
I would lean more towards the non-local just because you have to do less like server maintenance and worry about security and and you know you don't have to worry about getting um the powerful server, because basically all you have to do is get a web server um to handle the REST calls.
So you're leaning what, to the cloud or the on-premise?
To the cloud, yeah.
Cloud, yeah. Yeah.
Because then you're just dealing with Rust calls and
Yeah. All right. It'll be interesting. You know, it's unclear whether they're going to become more computational. I see all these papers like every week of somebody coming up with a more efficient LLM that's smaller. And there are people who are convinced that smaller LLMs and just having smaller LLMs each train on one specific thing is the way to go. And for some of our other applications, I sent you some slides for some of our other applications like the global tumor board scientist. I think that might be a better way to go. But even for this one, right, you could have different agents trained, one on empathy, one on literacy, right? I'm not 100% convinced that either way, whether we should have multiple agents each trained on a different aspect of tailoring or have just one LM trained on everything. There's a cost of both, but long term, what's more cost effective, like for thousands or millions of users? I don't know. It's a good question, but yeah, you can rack up the cost pretty quickly if you're not careful.
exactly, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Well, let's get the summary of this in the next day or so online, and then we'll do a deeper dive with everyone else in 2 weeks. In the
All right.
meantime, let's Ava follow up with the people in the other group, see how they're coming along, if they can present the next time. And I will try to generate some additional content with the other LLMs and work with both of you to sort of update this presentation for next week or in 2 weeks. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.